Eric Johnson, a weed biologist and officer in charge at the Scott Research Farm in Scott, Saskatchewan. Camelina has some very desirable agronomic properties, and it has a unique fatty acid profile. So it has a number of applications well, even in the food industry, but more so in the industrial applications. So we've been looking at camelina, doing agronomic work now for 4 or 5 years at Scott, just to come up with information as to where it's adapted, and to develop a production system of production practices for growers, like seeding rates, fertilizer management, and that sort of thing. The desirable agronomic traits of camelina are that it's early maturing. It does have some stress tolerance. It seems to have the ability to tolerate drought stress, or some type of drought stress. It has very good frost tolerance, and appears to have some heat tolerance as well. It's resistant to a number of insects that affect canola, such as flea beetles, so there's really no need for a seed treatment, an insecticidal treatment, which reduces your seed costs and has some environmental advantages in that respect. It's resistant to diseases like black leg, and although it is susceptible to some other diseases like downy mildew. The crop itself, because of its early maturity and its ability to tolerate some stress, is well suited for the short growing season areas like northern Alberta, the Peace River area, for example, and also the brown soil zone, where with the brown soil zone, of course, you can grow canola there, but it's not really well adapted to the brown soil zone. So based on some of the information we've generated, it's certainly well adapted to those two areas. Right now, there's been very limited breeding in the crop, and it's performing quite well with the limited breeding. So there's great potential, I think, to increase the productivity of the crop through traditional plant breeding. And I anticipate that the performance of the crop relative to canola and other crops that we're growing will improve. But right now, it doesn't, in the really good canola growing areas, it really doesn't provide the same level of performance as, let's say, canola will. But it certainly will have a fit in a non-traditional canola growing area. Camelina, was grown since the Stone Ages, actually, in Europe. There's still some production in parts of Europe. It actually was first evaluated in the prairies in the 1960s, and there was some potential to it then. It was just a matter, was there a market? So it's kind of it's been in the background for 40-50 years, really. There's been some work in the United States, and Montana State University did quite a bit of work in developing camelina, and that's carried on by an individual in a private business, and so it's been around for a while. It's just starting to, I think it's starting to find its niche and its place in the marketplace with the growing biofuel, bio-industrial crop type of initiatives that are going on. So I think it's just a matter now we're finding the fit for it. The uses are being investigated right now. Right now there is about 20,000 acres grown. Most of that is for the jet fuel industry. And now there's a number of companies that are looking at camelina as a feedstock for other industrial purposes. There's possibilities of genetic transformation to produce oils profile similar to castor oil. Other oils that come from plants that are really difficult to produce agronomically, there is the potential to take genes from those crops and transform camelina to produce that type of oil or that type of fatty acid content. The oil content of camelina is based on my own research. I mean, there's some other research there, but it's not much lower than canola. It's maybe 2-3% lower, and again, without much breeding that's been done in Western Canada, so there's going to be a huge opportunity to increase that oil content. So we're not at a point where the breeders have to play catch up in terms of increasing that oil content 10% or something like that to make it competitive with other oilseed crops. It does have a fairly high oil content. The 1,000 kernel weight of camelina is about 1 gram, and if you compare that to open pollinated canola, the 1,000 kernel weight of open pollinated canola would be about 3.5 grams, and hybrid canola would be about 4.5 grams. So it's a very small seed, and that makes it a bit of a challenge to establish. Although it's pretty vigorous, it does germinate easily, very readily. But because it's so small seed, the seed placement in the soil is very critical. But there's no need to modify buy any different equipment. You can use existing seeding equipment, existing harvesting equipment. The crop doesn't shatter, so you can straight combine it. There's no need to swath it, which is a huge advantage in that respect as well. So, no, it's well suited to fit into our current agricultural production system in Western Canada. We're looking at various seeding dates. In the United States, in Montana, we're told that they do have success with seeding it in the fall. There are winter types and spring types of camelina. We're working mainly with spring types, and the idea in the fall is to seed it, get it to form a rosette, and get it to overwinter. We haven't had really much success with that. Now, I've heard from some people in the industry that growers in the most southern parts of the prairies have been able to do that. And so it could be an environmental issue. We've been evaluating this at Scott and Indian Head, so we're quite a bit north of the area where it might work. But what we found, if you are seeding it in the fall, you got to seed it as close to freeze up as possible, and so it doesn't germinate. If it does germinate, it seems to freeze off. It's not getting through the winter. But our best results have been with early spring seeding, and since it matures in 85 to 90 days, it's early maturing enough that spring seeding works quite well. Farmers are very innovative, and if they see that this will provide them with some opportunities, they definitely will adopt it.